are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Malia Lazu, and I'm the Executive Director of Future Boston Alliance. And Future Boston Alliance is a platform that is pushing for a creative and cultural renaissance here in the city by embracing the talent and beauty that we have in all of our neighborhoods. And the Urban Mail is one of those conversations. And we started the Urban Mail after we started a party series, and a lot of the men who were coming were saying that there wasn't a space for them to not be highlighted, to meet one another, and to be celebrated. And so we wanted to provide that space. So every quarter we bring some amazing entrepreneurs together, and we have a conversation. And so some people say, well, are you going to do an urban female? Like, sure thing, holler at us, we'll totally do it. But we do think it's important that men of color specifically, we think they have a very unique experience in the city of Boston. And we want to be able to create a space for that, which we think isn't done enough, and quite frankly isn't done as much as women have chances to be celebrated and be brought together. And I think this past year of the conversation with whether it's Black Lives Matters or Muslim Lives Matters, has really been, around the conversation we need to have of men of color. So thank you so much for joining us and having this conversation. I would like to thank Back Bay Social Club. Yay! They've been hosting us every time, and it's just such a wonderful space, and it's so wonderful to be downtown. We think that the claiming of space is something that's really important. And that we live in all of Boston, so we can come here and we can enjoy ourselves. I joke around and I say that Assemble, our ultimate goal of Assemble is to make everyone a lighter shade of brown with a bit of Asian in them. But really what we want to do, so meet your neighbor. First Future Boston baby gets a lifetime free diapers. No, I'm kidding. But really what we want to do is we want to help encourage people to get to know one another, not just in a transactional way. Because we do that. You can go to a networking meeting and you can pass out your business card. But really, we all live in this city, which means we create the fabric of Boston, which means if there's things we don't like about the fabric of Boston, we actually have the power to change them, and we have the power to increase the things we like. And so that's just what we try to do here. And it's great to be able to take over a place like Back Bay Social Club. I'd also like to thank James Rowe and Jomo King for doing this amazing sound. So you can hear these amazing men speak to us tonight. And I also want to thank Boston Naturals, who gave away a lot. If you want hair products, men, there's men hair product envelopes up there where you can get coupons and such for your hair. So we want to thank Boston Naturals. She just called us and she was like, I have all this men stuff. And we're like, what? Well, we have a men event, so bring it on. So thank you to her. And tonight, we're going to get started with our panelists. And so what I'd like to do, housekeeping. Bathrooms in the back of that curtain right there. And food is on the bar. I'm a good monkey. I do my job well. And I'd also like to thank Erin Anderson, who is the person who brought us all here together and who's giving me these great notes to give you this great information. So with that, I want to just start with introductions, and I'd like to ask you to talk a little bit about, say, your name, what you do. If you want to talk about a business or an affinity that you represent, that would be wonderful. And then the conversation tonight is around mobility. And we don't only mean mobility and how you get around the city, but are there opportunities with mobility? What does public transportation mean? What does it mean for people of color? And so why don't you also talk about, maybe get us started with your thinking around how mobility can be used to bring people together.
Okay, well, I'm David Lee. I'm an architect and urban designer and former adjunct professor in planning and urban design at Harvard. And we've done a lot of transit design. We actually designed the renovations to South Station 100 years ago. And we started with the community opposition to the highway that ended up in being the Orange Line. So we designed a lot of that, and we continue to do a lot of transit stuff. But I'm going to go immediately off script.
Yeah.
In part because of where I am in this space. And you talk about claiming the space. Well, when I first came to Boston to go to graduate school, there were two clubs in this area, Paul's Mall and the Jazz Workshop. And they were famous clubs where everybody came to play. And among them, of course, was Miles Davis. And Miles had just finished a set one night, and Keith Jarrett, who was his piano player, was asking him why he hadn't played certain tunes. And Miles had this really raspy voice, and his response was, "Because I love them too much." And the idea was Miles was always about the next thing. And so I'm especially pleased because I see none of the usual suspects.
Give y'all a round of applause.
So
The real people.
So I'm very pleased to be here tonight, and I'm sure this is going to be a great conversation.
Thank you so much. Caesar?
Hi everyone, I'm Caesar McDowell, President of Interaction Institute for Social Change, and I'm also on the faculty at MIT in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning. I am among the usual suspects. Sorry for that. But it's actually great to be here. I see lots of folks that my life in the 30 years I've been here in Boston have connected with when they were much younger.
Watch it.
We'll go there. But actually, I'm really glad we're having this conversation right now. Our organization is involved. David's involved. A number of us here are involved in an effort that the Boston Transportation Department is doing to really re-envision mobility and transportation in Boston, called Go Boston 2030. And it's we're trying to redefine how the public gets engaged in actually shaping the vision and the future of transportation in the city. So we'd love to talk to you more about that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Kenneth Bailey, Design Studio for Social Intervention, and I've been in Boston half my life, which isn't that long.
10 years.
Yeah, about 7 years. And I live in JP, and my colleague Lori told me to talk about this idea around mobility that we talk a lot about in the studio, developmental mobility, that who you are is shaped by where you get to go, and where you get to go turns back onto who you are. And so a lot of who we get to be are expressions of where we've been and where we get to go, and that becomes politics. You know, like who gets to go where and how they get to be in certain places determines what you know, determines who you know, determines what then shows up on your body as who you are. And we want to sort of bring that perspective as we talk about where do black men typically get to go or don't get to go. How does that then shape who they become, and how does that shape how they interact with each other? And bringing that into the realm of politics. And I'll just stop there and pass it on to Louis.
I'm Louis Navarro. I live in Dorchester, and I'm with the Boston Area Youth Organizing Project. Mobility to me, when I think about it, is how communities get to other communities to communicate with each other on issues that is happening around the city and how it's affecting them. But mostly with young people like my age or my generation, how do we get around to communicate with each other and communicate more with our communities and get more out there to think more bigger and broader than just, you know, our regular homes and our hoods. But yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm coming over here so you didn't have to pass the mic back. And can we just give Louis another round of applause? I think he is the youngest panelist we've ever had on Urban Mail. So all you adults, take out your pens and write stuff down because you're going to learn stuff today. All right, I think I'm gonna do this Oprah style because I'm a little, or I guess Sally, what was her name?
Jesse Raphael.
Come on, older people, help me out. Thank you, Sally. Donahue, whomever. So let's get the conversation started. And let's start with you, David. Talk to us about the three, talk to us about, components that you want to think about when building models of mobility. So, you know, the idea of public transportation, it's intentional, it's planned, there's a lot of money that goes into it. So what are some components that we want to see?
Well, 3 or 4 things. And the first thing is, does it take me where I want to go and where I need to go? I mean, does it take me to my job? Does it take me to, you know, my friends, the places that I need to go? Secondly, can I afford it? You know, the cost of transportation affects a lot of things, including where you live and where you work. Some of you may have seen a piece that was on the news a while back about a guy who walked like 21 miles a day to his job or something like that. It was in the New York Times. And somebody actually gave him a new car so he could get back and forth to work. But that's part of it. Then there's another component of it too. It has to do with reliability. You know, if you're supposed to be at work at a certain time, you can't be fooling around with a bus that isn't showing up or you know, a train that stopped. So when you start to think about systems, you got to think about their viability in terms of getting you where you need to go. They need to be affordable and they need to be reliable. And then there's some other dimensions. You need to feel safe on that. You need to feel safe because you're in a space that maybe it's another neighborhood. The people in that neighborhood need to be comfortable that you're there, and you need to feel comfortable that you are there. It's not like you're going to move in and date their sister. You got a gig. You're there. You're there. That could happen too, but that's not why you came.
What train is that?
But as Louise said, you know, it's about, you know, connecting and seeing a world beyond your own world, and but feeling safe there. And then also it has to be accessible and that's something we spend a lot of time in the design professions with, is thinking about ways in which to make it accessible for people who are disabled for one reason or another. And we are all disabled at some point in time. I'm a skier, and I have to tell you, I took a big fall last Sunday, so I'm disabled for this week, that's for sure. But the fact is, part of what we're beginning to think more about from a design standpoint also is universal design that makes it easier for a person with physical challenges to move about as well. Because, as Malia is saying, it's public transit. We're all paying for it. So we all ought to be able to benefit from it. We ought to be able to place demands on it, and it ought to serve us.
Thank you.
So I don't do transportation. I do public engagement, really about how do you get people involved in really thinking about how they want to be in the city and spaces in the city.
I'm just going to ask you to put this a little closer to your mouth.
How about that? I feel really weird now. It's hard to think with this thing in my face.
Well, you can make it comfortable just have it at that
Oh,
level.
at this level. Okay, that's a little better. But actually, I want to listen to you, David. I was thinking about all these systems that are in place as a part of the transportation thing. There are two things for me that are interested in thinking about mobility. One is, how can we build our communities in our cities so I don't have to get on the train to do the things that I need to do on a day-to-day basis? That it's not the requirement that I move from where I live to actually have a quality of life. So that's one. The other is, let's do a lot of work around technology and looking at technology infrastructures and how we've built out all of our technology change and the whole thing with cable and cellular. And you know, 20 years ago we were arguing the thing about how we are building our telecommunications infrastructure on top of an old system. Other countries didn't have that old system, so they built theirs on a new system, and they've actually leapfrogged against us. And I think the question for us in transportation is, how much of our old system do we need to forget? And what can we create instead that actually might get us to a different place?
Love it, love it.
Well, I think a lot about space, and a lot of my friends really, I'm more of a space and society guy, and that plays out in design studio a lot of ways. We wrote this paper called Spatial Justice. But because I think about space, some of the things I think about the city or about transportation, mobility, and urbanity. One is, what does transportation presuppose about one's desires to get around the city? So if I don't desire to wake up in the morning and go anywhere in the city, does it matter if I can get anywhere or not? So what do we do to make sure that a city has destinations and opportunities for us to actually want to get anywhere in the first place? So that's one thing I think about with Boston, or I think about with any place. Like, I tend to like places that I tend to like cities that are filled with places that I want to be. And space-times that matter to me, or reflect me back to myself, or make me feel like I'm me, you know what I mean? Like, space is supposed to be like, you know, public space and third spaces where you get to be free, where you get to be yourself. So that's that. How many spaces or how many opportunities do we have to get to be ourselves in space in the city? And then there's the, I totally just lost my train of thought. I lost it, it's gone. Maybe it'll come back on the next one, but I'm gonna pass it over to Lewis.
Wonderful.
In case it comes back. If
Take
it
it
comes back,
home
I'll
with
take it back.
I actually have 4 components when it comes to mobility. I think affordability, how can people afford it? Safety, how safe the people are, how far it goes, and the creativity of it. Because you don't want to ride, if you're on a bus for 38 minutes a day, you want something that, you know, you're going to enjoy being on for 38 minutes. So I think, you know, like you said, we run on an old system now, and we're a new generation. So I feel like we need new engineers on board, we need new students coming out of like MIT, more opportunities for youth to get more creative and more into their skills, so then they can connect schools to jobs that will help youth at a young age to become a career that they can, you know, what they always wanted to be. With safety is, how safe are people traveling? You know, late at night, you know, many workers that come out of work around 12 or 10, you know, who don't have a car, who have to take transportation. How safe are they on the bus getting to wherever they're going? Mostly for youth nowadays, you know, a lot of youth violence that's happening. How, you know, would they feel passing through a community that they know they don't feel safe around? So how do we make them feel safe enough to, you know, them to go home after work and just relax? And how far, like, you know, where does the transportation end at? Like Chelsea or something? I don't know how far it goes.
It depends.
It depends,
It
right?
depends.
Chelsea,
Framingham. Yeah.
and it goes out on the Green Line too somewhere.
Yeah, so I feel like we should start spreading out more. I watch a lot of cartoons and anime, so I picture of like the tubes and us traveling in tubes just to get to places. So like creativity towards it, to make it look more fun, to be like, you come to a new state, let's say you come to Boston, you're like, oh, our transportation system is whack. You come to Boston, it's like, y'all have tubes that y'all travel in. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, I want to stay in this tube all day. But creativity, you know, also goes in that.
We'll Mr. T you, Kenny. We'll just drug you and just set you in the tube. And then Jonathan will be there to meet you.
I remember.
So let me ask David Lee, can we get tubes that we can travel in? And I know that you had some other thoughts.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the technology is there. It's interesting, too, because technology has sort of changed the way we feel spatially. Now, I'm of a certain age where when I used to make a phone call, I knew where the person was. You know, because they had a landline. So you called their office or you called their home, right? Now, what's the first thing you say when you call somebody? Where are you? Right? You know, you say, well, hey, you want to have lunch? Well, I might, but I'm in Seattle. Right? But one of the things Luis said I think is really important, too, is that you're on these trains a long time. And you might as well be entertained while you're there. And it needs to be something to think about. Of course, that's a great time to read, too. But it's also a place to engage people. I mean,
maybe we have roving libraries on buses where people can get books.
That's possible, but on the other hand, you know, for years I used to ride Green Line everywhere, and I mean, I've moved my office, so I'm not on it as much anymore. But there are people I knew because they were on the Green Line. I don't know their names, but I've watched their kids grow up. You know what I mean? And if I see them and they're not at the stop, I say, wait a minute, right? I know you, but
Where's
you're
your
in the
kid?
wrong place, right? But the other thing that Louis said, which I think is really important too, is to recognize that the late night service isn't just about folks partying and wanting to get home. Now, folks drive bad enough in the daytime, so I surely don't want them driving when they're impaired. So I'm down with that. But there's a more practical reason for it too. If you go into an office building after 7 o'clock at night, the dominant language spoken downtown is Spanish.
That's right.
And these folks live in Chelsea, and they live in other kinds of places, and they need to get there because they finish, at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then how do they get back? Then that gets back into the affordability thing, it gets back into your choices about where you can live, and so on and so forth. And by the way, it's not just rich people that want to live downtown next to their jobs, and so they can walk and enjoy the restaurants and stuff. I think some other people would just as soon not be on the train, 45 minutes or an hour trying to get someplace in the middle of the night.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to snag the mic back from you because we're going to move to, and I would just like to say shameless plug as the organization that was one of the organizations that brought you late night transit. You're welcome. Oh, Erin's on the train every night just moving those levers. But we are going to lose it in June. Like, really, no joke. Like, I mean, we can laugh and we can be like, ha. So this is the bottom line. And then actually, I'm going to turn this into our next question. But so, first of all, it's the most subsidized ride. So the T is subsidizing every ride at $8 a ride. For rush hour, the T subsidizes at about 30 cents a ride. So that's what they're using to say that it's not affordable. The bottom line is that this is 1% of the T's budget. So yes, we're subsidizing at a great deal, and it still only equals 1% of the T's budget. So we do think there's room for conversation, which is why I took this moment to do this shameless plug. Because there's a reason why they're stopping it in June when all the students leave. And I think it's just really important that just tweet at Charlie Baker, like he sees it whenever you tweet it. So like, just tweet at him now or later and just be like, yo, dude, like, right, or now or later. Now and later, or in tomorrow morning, and like, but it's better to do it now than to do it in July when you're drunk trying to get a cab home. And you're like, damn, Charlie Baker. You would rather, do it now. So that's my shameless plug. But I want to sort of move this conversation. Terry Marshall from Intelligent Mischief, I'm sorry, I forgot this, actually.
Under the bus.
Was supposed to be emceeing this, so I'm really winging it, you guys. So like, please, I need all of your energy. And we're going to kick Terry Marshall under the bus because he's not here. Intelligent Mischief is one of our partners for this, so we love him as we're kicking him.
How many people think she doesn't need any more energy?
But let's talk about race when it comes to transportation. I mean, I think Louis brought up a really good point, and David, you seconded it, which is this idea of public transportation for whom and why and how. And so the question, whether it's late night train service or buses versus trains, is how does Boston, like how does our physical transportation system affect racial issues? And Kenny, if you don't mind, I'm going to throw this to you first because you sort of talked about that a little bit already.
Well, if you turn it back on the urban men or black men or men of color, however it is you want to spin it, when you see like groups of men together out in space in the center of the city, they're automatically surveillanced. They're automatically assumed that their intentions are hostile. They're automatically assumed that they don't have the economic sort of prowess to be there. There's lots of things that are already assumed, which gets back to this idea of destination. It gets back to what does transportation presuppose about the city? Like, if you don't want to move around in a place, does it matter if you have good transportation or not? Right. So we have to make this city a place that people want to move around in and feel like they can move around in. And while we're talking about that, we also have to talk about cops. We have to talk about the role that the current sort of why Black Lives Matter is an issue right now, why we're dealing with, we just had another issue of state-sanctioned violence over the weekend here in the city. And all of that is directly connected to all of our public infrastructures, and it all affects whether or not we feel like we can move around in public. So I think if the city's going, and I also have to applaud that the city's trying to tackle this issue of public transportation.
Say more about like what we can do to like help push that forward.
Well, I think there are a bunch of things. One, we need to think more about ourselves as a whole system of people in Boston and sort of get through. We often think about the issues of black men as problems that black men need to solve on their own as black men. You're a black man. You're like, thanks.
But I didn't just like survive 400 years of slavery. I'll
Right.
figure it all out.
Right, I got it. It would be really nice to get some help. So I think like for those of us who call ourselves, interested in issues of urbanity or equity or whatever, we need to figure out how to deal with some of these problems collectively. Come to things like Boston 2030. You can hear about more from that if you follow our outfits, you follow IISC or follow GS4SI, you'll be hearing more about Boston 2030. There's another meeting coming up that VRA is leading, that Landsmark is leading, sort of thinking about the future of the city overall, like urban design in the city. But I think also, to me, I think we just need to make better destinations for people of color. Like if we could just get in the business of designing and making and supporting new, interesting, creative destinations in the city and out of and around the city, like so that people actually have things that they want to go to. Like, there are not a lot of things I want to go to in Boston.
It's true.
There are not a lot of things I really.
So I want to, in keeping with the in keeping with the movement, exactly. Thank you. I want to pick up on that and ask, as our resident young person, so you now represent all young people. Congratulations. You represent all young men of color. No, every last one.
Even me.
But how does it feel when you're getting around the city? I mean, and I mean, we're joking about, saying that like you're our resident young person of color, but also you are it, right? I mean, you literally have a hoodie on today, right? So you are.
Give me one.
Well, you're not young,
That's what
but
they said.
I got you. Look, I didn't even ask for one, because I know I'm not young. That's how you get embarrassed. You just have to know you're not cool enough and move on. That makes you cool, Kenny. That makes you cool. But can you talk a little bit about just how it feels and maybe address this question from your experience of being a young man of color in the city?
Well, this is kind of going off topic, but
Go off topic.
but I was doing some research, and I realized that we spend a lot of money on our military, and I realized that if you cut the military budget in half, you still have the biggest budget of military. So you split that in half, you still have the bigger budget in military. So it's obvious that we waste so much money on policing and stuff where they talk about, oh, we're broke, we have no money. You're wasting too much money on things that you don't need, like policing. Why do you need to police your people? You can trust them enough to do what they need to do and get to where they need to get. But as a youth, I feel like, as a young person, traveling, I don't really have, personally, I don't really stress because I don't, I know I ain't gonna get into problems with another youth because I know better, like, we're both going through the struggle together. Why make it worse for each other? Why not help each other? So it's like, when it comes to transportation, it's like we realize they're raising the prices on us. We realize they're trying to do all these things on us. But we don't realize how do we attack them from stopping all these things from happening. Okay, so how am I supposed to get to school if you're raising it to $5 and I don't got a job because I am not old enough where I'm in your image or whatever, I'm an immature youth or whatever. You haven't really stepped outside the box to realize who are these youth? Who are the youth of Boston? What are they doing? Yeah, schools is whack. But, no, but, it's just like, you know, everything ties together. So it's like there's always, it's an igloo, or it's a glacier underwater. You only see the 10%. You don't see the big whole thing of it. So it's like, you see these 10%, but look deeper than that. Take out the water and see how big that glacier really is, and how hard you're hitting.
If we can believe in anything, it's the babies.
Before you go to another subject, I want to comment on that.
Please, Mr. Lee.
No, I'm going to take
This
on.
is Sankofa. I love it.
I'm going to take on some hard stuff, because we also have to look at ourselves. We have to own the city. We have to go where we want to see what we want. You go to New York, you go to Chicago, you go to a lot
Black
of other
people are
places.
around. Black folks are
And
around.
folks go places and they don't look at you like you had two heads, because you're used to going there and they're used to seeing you there. Now the hard thing is, we also have to know how to behave.
Yep.
Now I used to ride the green line, now I ride the orange line. It's a little different vibe. And, but you know, and I've seen people call each other all kinds of names but a child of God. And I've seen young women carrying themselves in ways that aren't right. Now I'm not trying to go.
I walk to work, so I mean, I don't take the one bus. I
Right.
walk from Cambridge to Dudley.
Now I'm not trying to go Bill Cosby on you, but all of us know that there's a certain way that you're supposed to act in public space. Now, when I was a kid, all my mother or father had to do was look at me a certain way, and I knew how I had to respond. But I'm embarrassed sometimes when I see how we talk to each other and about each other on public conveyances. So one, we have to figure, look, it's our city, and we can go anywhere and indulge whatever interests we have, but we also have to understand how one acts in a public space.
And Caesar, do you want to comment on that? Okay. Wonderful. I was just going to add to that I think that we're also ready. I think people of color, and especially at least, you know, the Black community that I'm involved in, is also ready to have this conversation, and I think we should embrace it. You know, people used to say like, oh, well, you know, they have this in Atlanta, they have that in Atlanta. We're the most well-educated and some of the wealthiest Black communities in the country. And so if we're not willing to fight the fight that they're willing to fight in the middle of Georgia, and that's just, you know, I think that it's just really important for us to think about that. But Caesar, you wanted to comment on that, so please do, and then we'll move to the next question, the last question.
The last question, okay. I mean, so I didn't grow up here. I came here from the South and the West. And one of the things that I know is true, I always feel about being in Boston is that there is no such thing as Boston. People don't live in Boston, they live in their neighborhoods.
Oh, especially.
Right? And it's pretty amazing. And, you know, it's this placemaking thing. You know, destinations. How do we have destinations? People feel like this is our city, we own it, and we want to be in all the places that it is. But it also has this deep history around places not being safe. Right? And this city hasn't healed from that. And I don't know how it moves forward without dealing with that. I mean, that's some of the work that the Boston Desegregation Project is trying to do.
Check them out.
But we, you know, without healing from the scars of busing that have, you know, in this city, it's going to be hard, I think, to open the city up to everyone. And then the only other piece I want to say about kind of, you know, setting destinations in the city is, I mean, like so many people here, you know, I mean, I've been to different places, different cities. These behaviors exist kind of everywhere, in different fashions. Yes, there are conversations we need to have with ourselves and in our own community to kind of set some new tones that would be helpful. But I also really feel like this is the bigger issue that we're really struggling with is how are any of us going to feel like this is a place we belong? And I don't think it's just our issue.
That's right.
There are so many people in this country, where they live, they don't feel they belong. And how do we start to build alliances with people around that? and reshape the city. And there are lots of opportunities that I think we need to start claiming. And that's the only way I can say it is claiming.
And what are some of them?
So
please?
for example, I take like the Go Boston 2030. You know, we're gonna have this event, it's May 10th and 11th. 8th and 9th, I keep missing the dates. I'll give you the wrong dates.
May 8th and 9th?
May 8th and 9th.
Yeah,
May 8th and 9th, everybody. That's the right dates.
May 8th, 11:30 to 7:30, or May 9th, 10 to 4 at the China Trade Center.
Hashtag Go Boston
Boston
2030 and you'll get all the info.
But the point about it is, it's a public process in which the city is asking people to come out and help shape the vision. Well, what would that look like if 90% of the people who showed up were people of color and said, we're going to shape the vision? Right? That's the call, that's the opportunity, and we should grab it.
Absolutely. Thank
Oh,
you.
back to you.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you. So I am going to round this out with the last question, starting with Luis. And this last question is about really what are the big ideas, right? So I mean, as an organizer, I spent hours, like I've done my Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours of talking about the problem. And what are some of the big ideas? Because if any city can figure it out, it's Boston, right? We punch above our weight. I mean, we're a small city. We're dope. We're the first. We're rich, right? I mean, all of these things that can. I mean, I'm saying we're planning, folks. I mean, shut the curtain so the people don't hear upstairs. You know what I mean? Like we're planning. So we know we have all of these advantages. I mean, we have MIT, we have Harvard. You know, they love being around poor people of color. They love it. They really do. You just have to invite them out and say, help us plan this shit. And they're like, we love it. So we can think big, right? I mean, we have Mass General. I mean, we you know, they sit on a train line. What can they do? We can get like heart monitors while we're, I mean, who knows? I'm saying, let's think big. Future Boston is a place where we think big. Boston is a city where we think big. And where we know you can be little and think big. So I'm going to start with Luis. What are some ideas you have about how we use the fact that a whole lot of people go to Downtown Crossing and stand on that platform? You know, that a whole lot of people get on the #1 bus. What are ways that we spend those 38 minutes getting to know one another? And like, just what are some of your big ideas about those opportunities?
Well, I think we should start with like giving youth more. Youth have way too many time on their hands. First of all, that's why we have so much youth violence, because they have nothing to do throughout the day. Now, if we gave them jobs and opportunities, they'll be more worried about that and less on little things. You know, like, oh, I have a problem with that kid. I'm gonna start a fight on the bus because I don't like him. You know, and you know, it's obvious. A lot of people hang out in like more of the city than out to the neighborhoods, because there's little, quote-unquote, more people that hang out over there. So if we begin to build more teen centers inside these communities, then we can bring in more of the youth together. You know, if we have police officers do these teen centers where they really can connect with the youth and really like, you guys want to go out to fishing? Let's go take y'all fishing. Y'all want to go to Gillette Stadium? Let's go to Gillette Stadium. We got y'all. So if we begin to bring in everybody inside the community, and the community begins to shape and build Boston as a community, and begin to, you know, like, I just know that y'all were 2030 Boston. I seen it, and I was like, wow, that's an interesting thing. And I'm here sitting in front of y'all talking. I'm like, wow, that's even more interesting thing. But
Hashtag 2030. More interesting thing. I love
yes. But you know, if we begin to get in schools and talk to youth who want to be engineers and want to build things, you know, how do we get them into creating Boston? What are their ideas of building a country, but start in Boston so we can shine as Boston, and then we can show them off to the rest of the states of the country?
Thank you. David, if you don't mind, I want to actually go right to you because of Luis's comments, because I think what he's saying is, you know, it's right on, right? I mean, here, how do we use this time?
Well, you know, it's funny, with my last name being Lee, I always had time to kind of prepare for the question, because the teachers would start with the A's, or sometimes they'd get slick and start at the end of the alphabet, but they never started in the middle. So I'm sitting here thinking, I got time to think this through before she gets here, right? And she just completely busted my bracket, so to speak. But, well, a couple of things. When we did the Orange Line bunch of years ago, we had something called the Educational Training Program. And we took kids who lived on both sides of where the Orange Line was going, who had an interest in engineering, architecture, landscape architecture, or photography, or whatever, and we brought them into the various offices of the people who were designing the Orange Line. And ultimately, we also worked on the Central Artery Project, and one of the students who had been a student during the Orange Line studies actually came to work for me when we were working on the other things. So we had that thing going. I'd like to come back to something Cesar said too, because I remember when I first came to Boston, this whole neighborhood thing. The fact is, like, everybody's got their own neighborhood, and it wasn't like they were part of a larger city. And so we have to address that, and there may be some ways to do that. One of the things I was talking to Malia about was we designed South Station, and part of the way in which we designed that was to think about it as a public square, because people were all coming there, so there's food, there's books. Used to be at Christmas time, they used to have trains, toy trains running around, and then like if somebody was coming in doing a new play in town, they might come and entertain people there. So again, we own this stuff, it's public stuff, so maybe we should think about programming it in such a way that people can actually take advantage of the physical space that's there, and it's proximate because you can get there. Some years ago, Seiji Ozawa came out with the Boston Pops to the Reggie Lewis Center, and you had all of these people, white people, Asian people, Latino people, black people, all around Roxbury Crossing Station because they came to this event, and that was very cool. But again, we also have to claim all of the city. I'll close with this. I was at a discussion with Nikki Giovanni a long, long time ago, and when she finished her talk, a young man got up, an African-American young man got up, and he said, "Nikki, I'm a poet. I aspire to be a poet." He said, "But like, if I write a poem about a sunset, is that black?" And Nikki looked at him and said, "Did you write it?"
Yes, no, pass the mic to Susan. I'm not going after that. I'm not going after Nikki Giovanni, shoot.
You don't get it.
I mean, I'll take it if you want. But to go on the Ozawa one and Roxbury Crossing, my inversion of that in terms of claiming the city would be if we can get the old parish or Francois to spin down at the hat show. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we have to figure out how to do more, like, stuff that would be interesting to us in the heart of the city. I just said those things in the house. But,
Yes,
y'all might want to bring Jay Dilla, or somebody else.
Look, oh, the young one's gone. He can't tell you.
I need somebody to tell me what they want to do. But that was really it.
But also, Kenny, I want to push you a little bit, though, and I'm pushing you because I know you personally and I love you.
Right.
Space where people intersect is really important, and it's something that you spend a lot of time thinking about. And so I want to push you a little bit to talk about what happens in those spaces where, it's sort of like chaos, right? I mean, where nothing planned is intersecting, and how do we use these spaces of, it's not randomness, but for the people experiencing it, right? Like we're all here because we all have to get on the train, right? So like, how do we? What are some big ideas that we could use? I love this idea of having a soul revival at Court Street. Court Street is this huge train station. Let's get folks to let's do soul revival at Court Street, right? Like, what are some of the ideas that we could do to really get to know one another while we're riding the Orange Line from Charlestown to Forest Hills?
We have an artist right now who's a transit artist in residence who's doing installations on buses and in subways, and she just did a spoken. It's Aziza Goodnight, and she just did a spoken.
Yay, Aziza!
And she just did an installation with a bunch of poets on the number 15 bus and on the number 23. And now she's thinking about doing shows where people who are bus drivers will organize their buses to actually turn their buses into galleries where they show their art, and it's like the bus driver's artwork.
Awesome.
But in terms of, to me, I feel like buses or subways, well, when I get on, now is when I would talk a lot about getting on at the Orange Line, and all the stuff you see is like advertisement for like the neoliberal regime. You know what I mean? But all you see is like stuff about Kanye's Yeezys, and I don't even know what a Yeezy is. Or you'll see something about somebody else rich, or you'll see, but you can't see anything that actually has anything to do with civil society. Or like what's actually happening here, or what's actually happening with people. So I think one thing would be to hack those monitors and to actually have things coming up on those monitors.
I'm looking at some of the people I know are tech experts.
To actually show stuff that's
I
relevant
expect to see
Boston.
Roots playing when I'm riding in the morning.
And then what if we had apps? Like we always talk about hacking apps and having apps. So what if we had apps that actually let us engage in concrete things having to do with civil society in Boston through those interfaces that they are so used to putting up on the buses, so that it's not like we're looking at something that's outside of us, in some far way where we can never engage in, but we can actually deal with stuff that matters to us. So
Awesome.
you pushed me.
Awesome.
Maybe that's what
I
came
did
up.
push you. Thank you. You can.
No.
Yes, you can. The young person can say whatever he wants, whenever he wants.
Swag.
I'm his. What am I? Well, whatever. Go on. I'm like out here finding in arms.
I remember, I don't know if this was like 08 or 09, but I remember getting on the train and they would have these little script things, and when the train would go, it was like a little show would go by, and I used to always love those, and just, can we just get on the train just so I can see that, and just wait for it, and be like, oh, there it goes, and try to get back on it again. But if we do that, but with people's artworks and have like people actually do it, so it would be like a flick of somebody running, kicking a ball or something. That's something that would be like, catch people's attention out the blue, like, oh, yo, did you see that? And then spark a conversation with somebody like, yeah, and then, for real, you try, wow, we cool friends now. But if we have, things like that where it attracts two people's attention, and then from that, they'll notice it, that they attract their attention, and it'll attract their attention to be like, yo, let me talk to that person, even though I don't know them. So it'll break that, bubble of, let me just stay on the train by myself and ignore everybody because I hate everybody at this moment. But I love everybody. Let's talk to everybody on this train and see how it is. So like, customize the train station and make it a rainbow on one of the carts, and then another cart have like James Bond on it or something. Or like I seen a thing in France where a group of like graffiti gang or whatever, and they waited till the train stopped and they did a whole beautiful graffiti of like a cartoon or something that says live life or something, but they all took their time working together to do it, and then everybody was like, wow, that's a beautiful artwork, because it brings out something more of the community. So I feel like if we have communities build our systems, then we'll start connecting more into communities and have communities connected to the city, so it can be like, yo, you go to Dorchester, they put up those world things, and a group of elementary students built it. You should really go check that out. It's really nice. But things like that where, elementary students build something.
People are getting to know one another
Yeah.
because they're riding on the train. So it's like, oh, that's East Boston students or whatever, Definitely. David, you're jumping.
No. This is really quick, and I have no idea how you could make it work. But
We
like,
can make anything work. Look at this room. This is like a beautiful, brilliant room.
But if you take the train to New York, you have the option to sit in the quiet car. So what we need is a quiet car on our trains where you have to put away your personal devices. So you have to engage the people of there. Now you can choose to get on that car, but you get on that car because you know that might be an
But
opportunity
that's
to
a
meet
social
somebody
car.
interesting.
And
Exactly.
Future Boston, MBTA, Future Boston is down to sponsor those cars. We'll get people talking to one another without a problem. Caesar, take us home. I think we're in a great space for you.
Take it home. Take it home, okay.
Us home. You have to take all of us home.
Take everybody home. Okay. I think with all this is coming down to about thinking about, well, what in the future, what can we do to bring people together, is we have to reclaim these transportation spaces and cars as public spaces, right? That they don't belong to corporations, they're not up for sale, but they are the places in which we allow and support the public to come together. And we purposely design for that all the time. And thinking about everything from how we're making it affordable for that to happen, what do we have as activities going on while people are waiting for it. But one of the problems we have, you know, it's not just in the city, it's everywhere, is we actually don't have any institutions or infrastructure that are about building the civic life of people who live in the same space together. It doesn't exist. No one's responsible. Yeah, nobody feels that's their responsibility. And what we have to say is, no, we need that.
That's right.
We need that. And you know, we keep talking about that work as kind of big democracy, the work we want to do, and it's really about making it possible and taking it seriously that we have to design for us to be connected.
That's right.
And we have to make that one of the highest things that we're really interested in making happen. And it's like the destination work happening, using the arts, how we actually design these places. It has to be about bringing us together, creating the spaces for the public to actually be in a relationship. And then one last thing I want to say about that is if we don't do it, and we haven't been doing it, what it actually means is all these institutions that are out there, the only way our democracy starts to work then is, you know, they basically becomes the public being in relationship to some institution, and those institutions divide our interest, and then we're not connected. And what we have to do is figure out how can we be in relationship with each other. Let us figure out together what it is we want, and let's hold our institutions accountable to us, not us to them. And I think that's a lot.
Thank you so much. Can we give this panel a great round of applause? I want to open it up for a couple of questions. So while people are thinking of their questions, I'm going to do a couple more commercials. I want to recognize Zine Media for recording all of these talks. So if you go on our website, you can actually see the series of talks, and this one will also be on it. And all of them are this amazing. And I'd also like to thank our awesome interns. I've been checking you in and making sure that you're doing great. So with that, we have time, and it's not like we have time because time's a construct and we can do what we want. We're all free and we're all adults. But I'm saying this as if we have time, meaning that like people like to socialize with one another and socialize with drinks. So I don't want to keep too much time being like, hi, my name is so-and-so, you know, because it kind of brings down the energy. So with that, we have time for 2 or 3 questions if anyone has any questions. Oh. Okay, darling, can you walk up? This is Phoenix, who was also her business with one of our accelerator programs. We're very proud of her.
Thank you. So, I can't help but understand, there's a lot of different generations here have a lot to say about transportation. And this question is for Lupe. I'm sorry, Louis. But
should we all call him Lupe now?
No, do not. I just really slipped up. I can call him that. That's big. Okay. I can call him that. But my question is for you, as well as, I'm so sorry. Could you say his name one more time?
Mr. Lee.
Mr. Lee. Okay, so this is to both of you.
You're going with the 2 young people.
It's total Sankofa happening right now.
Right, so I just want you, because I was hearing a lot about both the past transportation and as well as like what we need now. And it's almost like I want to just put both of you in a room and just hear this as transportation. And so I wanted to hear, what do you think, the question for you would be, what key things do you feel like were an issue then that are fixed now? Or like what issues do you feel like are issues now that still need to be fixed? And Lupe, I want to ask you the same. Louis, I have to ask you the same question as well around the issues in which you see with transportation. And also, I'm familiar with some of your campaigns around transportation, so I'd like you to speak a little bit on that. That's
wonderful.
Well, the big challenge when I got involved with the transportation stuff back in the 70s, really, was accessibility. The whole idea that people could people with physical challenges could use the trains just like anybody else. And I was once speaking to a group of probably 7th graders or something like that in Brookline, and I was telling them all about the design of the Orange Line and how the community was involved and how we finally got there and how important it was not just to make it accessible, but to make it accessible in a way that didn't segregate people, so that the people who were in a wheelchair could, come and go in pretty much the same space as the people who were able-bodied. And so I told them about one of my proudest moments after it was all done and built. And I was riding the train one day and I saw somebody get off, get on the train, roll onto the train at one stop, and then they got to where they were going and they rolled off the train and moved on about their day. And I told them how proud that made me feel. But what really almost brought me to tears was this young group of kids clapped at that point. It was so nice that these 7th graders thought that that was a very important thing to do. So obviously accessibility is important. That was our big challenge. We now have new challenges. Maybe one of the ones would be how to make the trains run in the wintertime.
So, one of the things that we've been fighting for, we finally got it, but for 7 years we've been fighting for it, is the Youth Pass, which is a pass that's for ages 12 to 21. It's day and night. You can use it anytime, any day, anywhere. And you only pay $10 a month for youth ages 12 to 21. So it's like an affordable pass that you can use anytime you want. It's kind of like your ID, so you can keep it in your pocket, and it's like it's comfortable for you. And they finally decided to say yes after 7 years of telling us they have no money, or they don't have a way to fund it, this, that, and that, lie after lie after lie. They decided, okay, let's do it. It seems like a good idea. But for me, I need you to repeat the question again.
She just wants you to talk about the campaign.
She wants you to talk about your transportation, youth
So,
pass
yeah.
and all of that.
So yeah, the Youth Pass, 7 years of 7 years of fighting, close to 8, we felt by the 7th year like, okay, it's been 7 years. I felt like I don't want to leave and become 18 and become an adult and still see youth struggle with transportation and how to get on it with affordability and how to get to where they need to, so they can get to work or they can get to school on time and do this and still be there on time and not stress about, oh, I only got $1 and I need $1.20 to get on, but they ain't gonna let me on because I'm youth and this, that, and that, and so much commotions and so much stress on me. So I feel like now that we finally decided to say yes, it gives an opportunity to be like, all right, this is a new thing for a new generation where we can help them do what they really want. They gotta travel to Chelsea because they want to work on engineering and stuff like that. There's an affordable pass that you only pay $10 a month that you can go to every single day and not stress about it. So I feel like if after we got that, now we should think about, okay, so how do we open up, now that we're working with youth at this table, what are other conversations that we can start with them that would help improve transportation in general?
Awesome. How do we follow you on Instagram, Twitter, whatever it is you use?
We're organized. Facebook organized.
So no, we can have that debate later, darling. But so you can follow Design Studio. You can follow, I think Press Pass, right, is also on Twitter, and and you just hit them up and say, I want to give you $50, and then they'll hit you back and tell you how you can do that.
And ISC.
And ISC, right, is also online. So definitely look them up. These are solutions that you can take a part in now and be a part of. And I know we had another gentleman for our second question before we round out the night.
Hi. So it's a little bit kind of like off topic, but I was just picking up on something that I felt was a theme. So I'm just wondering, since we're talking, we seem to be talking pretty much just about black men, which I think is problematic, but that's a separate thing. My question is, as a person who's done organizing here for communities in Boston, what do you think is a way that we can get men of color, especially young men of color, particularly black men, interested in coalition building, because I heard someone say earlier that, you know, folks aren't showing up for us, right? That like we're kind of being told, hey, you know, good luck figuring out your problems, when I think that that's actually not true. And I don't, because I oftentimes don't see men of color, particularly black men, around when we're talking about sexism, when we're talking about trans folks, when we're talking about, you know, ableism, etc. So I would just like to know, can you guys, can you hear me? So I'm just, how can we get people interested, young men of color interested,
In activism
and
and active-
and coalition building around other issues?
That's a great question.
He wants it
And
first.
he wants it first. And then Kenny, who brought it up, is gonna take it second. Yep, no, that's right, brother, you're gonna take it second.
I'm happy that you brought this conversation because it makes me question, how do I bring youth into organizing? How do I get them interested how I got interested? And it's funny because in my school, they dropped this thing where it's like, you have headphones or anything electronic out, they take it. If you don't want to give it to them, it's a 2-day suspension automatically. So a youth came up to me, they were like, I hear you do organizing or your job do all these things. We really want you to come through. So I feel like it's issues that, to really, you gotta bring out the issues that really affect them, that they know affect them, but they don't really like stress about it. So like, you know, racism, you know that it's happening, you know it's there, you know you live through it every single day. But how does it affect you directly? Do you want an officer to stop searching you every day? Do you want to go to school and not, you know, go through a metal detector and not be searched? Then, you know, really show that you do care. So I feel like if, you know, if you do a march or if you do a protest and you tell youth to come and have fun, they're gonna come out. They're gonna come out. They're gonna push their side out their problems away and really be like, yo, this issue is something that's really affecting me and my peers and other people that I really don't know. So, you know, I feel like walkouts is one thing that would really capture students' attentions. Testing and stuff like that, if you bring out things that they go through in school, they're definitely gonna come out. So like testing, nobody likes testing. So if you be like, yo, y'all wanna stop the standardized testing, come to this meeting and let's talk about your ideas to stopping it. You know, you're the future, so you decide what you wanna see in that future, you know? You're the person that's gonna go through it, so you decide what you wanna see in your Boston, you know? So I feel like, you know, you just tell them you have the power. Show them that they got the power. Show them that, you know, your voice really matters. Because if I can stand up here and talk to y'all and talk to 1,000 people like it's nothing, they can most definitely do it.
Kenny, take us home, brother.
All right.
Take us home.
Well, I have a take.
Now, I want your take. That's why I'm telling you. Your take.
And I think that it has to do with creating more spaces that actually engage large groups of people around issues affecting civil society. Like, I feel like one of the things that's happened in the past 10, 15 years, like post 9/11, is we don't have very many spaces to really think well about multiple kinds of identity, multiple kinds of ways in which we engage with the other, ways in which we engage in space. The 90s weren't like that. We had a lot of space to, like, one, read with each other, think with each other, engage in discourse. It was just a completely different sort of beast. And now it's like post 9/11, almost any space for any discourse around civil society or around social life has been eradicated. So I feel like in a lot of ways, like, you know, part of what we're trying to do at the studio, or part of what we're trying to do, I feel like with this work with the Interaction Institute for Social Change, is start to resuscitate a civic culture. But it's like, I feel like in a lot of ways, the work that we're trying to do is like the work that was done by regimes of power post 9/11 to squelch civic discourse was pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
So it's
complete.
like
It was pretty
we
complete.
don't really respect how deep civic discourse got squashed. And the work that we're trying to do to build it back up is nascent. And our organizations, you know, we're thin. And so a lot of our work, like to even like get to a place where we can actually start to say we are affecting culture, I feel like, you know, it's going to be a while. So trying to get back to commensurability. So that would be where I'd end it.
Thank you. Thank you.
So restorative justice, I'm telling you, if you do circle with youth and you have them like bring out your anger, bring out your sadness, what makes you angry, what gets you mad in your community, and have them start talking about it, is gonna spark up a conversation that's gonna live on a lifetime. So restorative justice circle.
Awesome, awesome. Can we give our panelists another round of applause? Our youngest future Boston member is ready for some pizza. And I would actually like to take a moderator's moment to answer your question as well. I worked for Harry Belafonte for several years, and one of the things he used to say is, you can't ask a woman in labor for help. And I think that that's a really important part of reality when we're looking at who's available to do what and how. And so I just want to throw that out, that sometimes some of the people who have the hardest struggle to live day to day don't have time to do a 5K walk or to volunteer or to show up to even a Black Lives Matter meeting. And I think that it's important that we recognize that people carry burdens for us, so that we can even have conversations like this tonight, like Urban Mail. And so with that, there is some pizza. We'd like to thank our wonderful bartenders and people from Back Bay Social Club. I've had the Sauvignon Blanc. It's wonderful. I highly recommend it. And please get to know our panelists, get to know one another. Follow us at Future Boston. And Erin's pointing to me. Do I need to say anything else? I'm good? Okay. See, it's like you're the boss, but then you know who's actually in charge, right? Because you're like, right? Very good. And thank you. Hashtag the Urban Mail. Thank you so much for coming, everybody.